also because last week there was an Intellect event here, so we couldn't use a boardroom. We do have another event at the end of this month, which would be the normal June event. Okay, so 2 in this month. Okay, I'll show all the PowerPoint a little bit later on, but we've got a very special guest today. John, and his surname has got double dots on the top, and he said the easiest way to do it is to pronounce it as Vogue, but that's not correct. We'll ask John to do the correct pronunciation, but I'm delighted that John could join us because he's a very special person. He's not only an MVP with Microsoft, but also on Sessionize, where all of his presentations are. He is one of the most active speakers, so he does a lot of speaking on a lot of topics to do with Power BI and putting data in the hands of end users, which is exactly what we want to do as our user group. So I'm delighted that John could join us. He's from Denmark, and I'm going to hand it over to you. You're already sharing, which is great. I'm going to mute myself, and it's over to you. Thanks, John.
I appreciate the intro very much. It's a true delight to get to present to user groups like yours. I'll say as the very first thing before I do anything else that I hope you'll ask questions along the way. I'll do my best to check the chat, but also just make active pauses and ask and see if there are any questions. I find that these user groups it's actually way more fun than presenting at the large conferences and stuff like that. So I was really happy you guys reached out. Yeah, to just recap myself super briefly. My name is John, or Jon if you do it in Danish. I sometimes tell people pretend the J is a Y and it sort of works out. And then the last name, yes, nobody can do that because it's a German last name that somebody Danglified. So I say Fø, which is really weird. Anyway, I'm a consultant with Inspire, a Danish-based consultancy, and my role is a ton of different things, but I'll say among others, it's being a fabric architect, it's being a data platform advisor. Sometimes I'm also just cranking out semantic models and power apps. So I mean, I span quite wide. And somehow my screen sharing broke there because the room took over. So I'll just share again. Can you see my screen again?
Yes, we can. I've just unmuted myself. So that might also be the reason why I can't share, because maybe the room keeps taking
the room
over.
keeps doing it.
Okay, well, I'm going to unplug the HDMI.
Yeah, try that. Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see if it stays. Okay.
All right, let's do it.
So you nailed it, right? With my Sessionize profile, kind of discloses that I'm all about trying to let regular business people / data analysts do as much as possible with the tools and skills at hand. So I myself have a background from Power BI, and I'm not a super technical resource. I can vibe code, right? But I can't code by my own hands more than a bit of SQL maybe. But I get by, and it's crazy how much you can do with these tools, even as a regular business person. So that's where most of my talks they come from as well. I do lots of stuff that is about doing even more with Power BI. So I do a lot of talks about right back in Power BI with Power Apps, or automating refresh schedules with Power Automate, or creating Teams integrations or file exports with Power Automate. Do a lot of things natively in Fabric, right? How can we use the new translytical task flow features to do right back? There's a new Fabric apps that was announced Monday that I'm super excited about, even though that's diving into pro code territory, but AI assisted, but that's sort of in that same space. Today, the topic is how do we integrate OneLake and Dataverse? And that's from a well, let me just bring up the agenda here. Because truly we're already on to bullet number 2 here. The reason why I think this is an important topic is because you will often want to bring data from one platform into the other. I think many of the use cases for bringing Dataverse data into Fabric are centered around obviously trying to create that centralized data platform in Fabric, and that often includes either data that originates from applications that you might have built on the Power Platform, but knowing also that, of course, F&O data, Dynamics data might land in Dataverse. It's one of the easier ways to integrate that data into Fabric. So that's going to be, I think, a little more than half of the session today, because honestly, I think that's to some extent what most people are interested in. and then we'll spend a good 40% or so trying to go the other way. So how can we leverage Fabric data in Dataverse? So that's the plan for today. And personally, I think that it's a little bit of a strange situation if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem that we have both Dataverse and we have OneLake as sort of, well, essentially, data storage platforms in a way, right? That integrates with different parts of the Microsoft ecosystem. And I'll be the first to say that I'm a little annoyed that we have to build integrations between these. Like, why is everything not just accessible? Why is Dataverse not just a managed database that you can access from within Fabric and stuff like that? I have no idea. I don't have any insights telling that will change, unfortunately. That's just my, I have no problem doing a little bit of Microsoft bashing when I think it's warranted, and I think it is warranted at times, right? So I'll say it right off the bat. The things that I'm showing you today, to me, it feels like we're doing workarounds, but sometimes that's what you need to do to make ends meet, right? I don't want to waste more time just talking about it. I'm much more of a let's show the elephant kind of guy. So I've planned a bunch of live-ish demos. At least we need to go and see all these different integration points, talk about pros and cons, honest reflections on when you might prioritize one or the other. You have a little bit of background noise here. Just going to mute whoever that was. All right. So we'll start with the integration going from OneLake into Microsoft Fabric. And the way that kind of starts that story is with a somewhat old tool that some of you might be familiar with that's called Azure Synapse Link. And what Azure Synapse Link is a feature that with very few button clicks allow you to synchronize data from Dataverse into a data lake, a storage account in Azure Synapse. And once the data is in Azure Synapse, it's way easier for us to connect to from Microsoft Fabric because we can create shortcuts to those data lakes. So the way it goes, just before I show it, I should have had a little bit of an animation on there. Ignore the reflections part for now, perhaps. You do need to tinker a little bit with Azure to be able to do this, or have IT set up some things on the Azure side for you. You will need to have an Azure subscription resource group and a storage account for these data points to land in. Then you need to go into your Azure Synapse link setting in Power Platform. And then finally, once the link is set up, you create shortcuts from Fabric to there. But let's have a look, right? What's the fun in talking about it? So this is my Power BI tenant. This is my Power Apps tenant. Oh, it needs me to sign in. Great, I should have done that beforehand. Let's just see. Does that work? It does. Let me open up the Azure portal as well. So inside, I prefer to access the Power Platform in general through make.powerapps.com, but you could actually do most of this from the Power Automate side of things too. But in here, if you want to set up Azure Synapse Link, the way that's done is through the link in the sidebar called Azure Synapse Link. If it's not shown, I'm pretty sure I actually went ahead and pinned this myself. You'll need to go under More and need to find it in this list here. I think maybe even you need to go into Discover All, actually, which has even more than the menu does, which is super odd. But it's in here, I promise. Azure Synapse Link under Data Management. You can pin that for ease of use, and it'll show up in the sidebar. I'm pretty sure it's not there by default. I think you have to do that yourself, but it's been a few years since I did that. In Azure Synapse Link, you can create a new link. And when you do that, you're immediately asked for your subscription resource group and storage account. So before you can even do this, you do need to have IT or yourself, if you have permissions, go into Azure, make sure you create a subscription, create a resource group, create a storage account. You don't need to do any other fancy setup from the start, but you need to set that up, and then you can, just it's just a point and click exercise from there you decide where data should land, and then you need to toggle which tables from your Dataverse environment. And of course, you can only select tables from within the active environment where you're setting up the link, but you'll be able to sync that data to Azure Synapse. What's really nice about Azure Synapse Link compared to the next option I'm going to talk about is that this one allows you to mess with both partitioning and with the frequency of update all the way down to, I think, the most live you can have data synced between Synapse and Dataverse is down to 15 minutes. Keep that number in mind because it's an important figure. Once the data is synced, I'm not going to set up the new link. I'll just show you that in my storage browser here, I do have a blob container with this very easy to say URL or name, and this is where my link is going. So you can see I'm syncing a couple of random metadata tables and then a table I created myself. And this one is facilitated by, and now frankly I forget if it's one of the two, but I have two different Azure Synapse links set up here just for testing purposes. You can always go back in and see if it wanted to load which table. It was there. Which tables are you linking? And yeah, it was probably this one actually. It's pretty low code, right? Like there's a little bit of tinkering in Azure, and under the hood, you should know that billing wise, this exercise is going to be paid with Azure consumption. So the Azure Synapse Link consumes Spark resources. It will spin up Spark resources to do this sync. What it does is it takes your Dataverse data and converts it into Parquet files and lands it in that storage account of yours. And that's what makes it possible to then, from the Fabric side of things, if I go into a workspace in Fabric, go into a lakehouse here, that's what makes it possible for us to, from a lakehouse in Fabric, go ahead and now create shortcuts to my Azure data lake, and then grab that data that I have in my storage account. So let's just see if this works or if it needs to re-authenticate. You can see here it is, Dataverse, and you can see here are the tables that I was just showing you in Azure just a second ago. So I can now shortcut this table straight into Fabric. I don't need to do anything crazy. You can just reference that data that is there, and now my data is in Fabric. So that's a pretty smooth process from I think at least the point of friction here is the Azure setup. Of course, you can, if you're an advanced user, start tweaking the whole Spark resource job thing that's going on, start messing with the partitioning, as I mentioned, those advanced config settings. But if you just need to have data coming from Dataverse into Fabric at some interval, that's not necessarily instantly, this is a pretty solid solution. What you should know in general is that it's I think in general considered a slightly expensive solution if you're moving a lot of data. Those Spark jobs, they can run pretty expensive if we're talking large volumes. So I did just want to mention that. I want to show you an alternative to Azure Synapse Link. And that's the new, I say quote unquote, a year and a half ago, they made this new announcement about Dataverse Link, which skips the Azure part of things. And now you might say, well, okay, skipping Azure sounds fucking great. Excuse my language. As a Dane, you sort of get desensitized to swear words in English. So I'm really sorry if my mouth is running off sometimes. Apologies for that. Dataverse Link has its merit, but let me show you what it's about, and we can discuss why I don't necessarily think it's the best solution. So the way you set up Dataverse Link is a little confusing, I think. You go into your Dataverse environment again, and you go into the tables section of your environment, and you can click Analyze, and then you can click Link to Microsoft Fabric. You can only create one Fabric link per environment, per user. But you could have a colleague create another link, and there could be reasons for doing that, but let's get back to that. Once the link is created, confusingly, this link will appear under Azure Synapse Link. Yes, super obvious. But I have here a link to Fabric. That's my Fabric link. I can go in, I can click Manage Tables. Once this loads, you'll see I have all my tables here. I can select which ones I want to include. I can include D365 tables as well if I had F&O in my organization, but I do not. I just have a couple of Dataverse tables that I'm syncing here. Things you need to note: custom tables in Dataverse will only appear in this list if you enable track changes on that table. It's a very common sort of issue people are running into. They try to set up Fabric Link. They just expect that all the tables are going to be here. They can't find it. The reason is you need to enable track changes on those custom tables of yours. So just wanted to throw that out there. Once this link is established, what happens actually when you, let's just go through the GUI here. If you click, oh, no, I don't want to get started with Copilot. I want to say link to Microsoft Fabric already. Yeah. I wanted to show you the GUI, but I won't be able to here. I just wanted to show you that once you click that link to Fabric, it's going to ask you to either create a new or select an existing Fabric workspace. And what it's going to do is inside that workspace that you select, it's going to create a lakehouse with that same kind of name that you saw my Azure storage account tables a second ago got. The super unsexy name. This lakehouse will be created all automatically, and it will start syncing the tables that you've selected. That sync process is a little ambiguous what is happening. Like the first time you set up the link, depending on the volumes of data you have, the initial sync could take anywhere from 20 minutes, maybe even down to 10 minutes if you don't have a lot of data or tables, to the worst I've heard was 4 days. 4 days to sync all the initial data. Then it gets a little smoother because then it will start doing incremental syncs. But no faster. Like the first sync can be faster than an hour, but subsequent syncs will never be faster than an hour. It's going to basically, I think it's going to take the exact time slot you create the link, and every hour on the minute, from 60 minutes ago, it will sync any changes from Dataverse to Fabric. You cannot go down to the 15 minutes that you could with Azure Synapse Link. You have no power over when exactly the sync is going to happen, except for the fact it's going to be more or less exactly each hour it's kicked off, and then however long time it takes is, depends on a number of changes. So that link does a lot of work for you. You don't need to set up anything in Azure. You don't need to maintain any Spark resources. You don't need to pay for any Spark resources. And the data then just lands in this lakehouse at some interval. The solution works great if you don't expect to be able to micromanage that sync process. If you just need, say, data to continuously come in, and it doesn't matter if it comes in at 3 in the night or 4 in the night, Fabric Link is great. I think that in general, I would have liked a little more transparency into sort of how that whole sync operation goes on. There's a little bit that you can sort of, sometimes people experience, there's a little bit of, there's a table that's messed up in Fabric. The metadata is out of whack or something. You can go into the tables section here of this Fabric link. And once this loads, there's a button here to refresh Fabric tables. This will force a metadata sync between Dataverse and Fabric. So you have a couple of buttons that you can sort of tweak there. You can always add more tables as well if that's what you want. Let me just go back to the presentation real quick. It's by far much easier to set up than Azure Synapse Link, but it is a much less flexible solution. It used to be, I think it's gotten a little bit of a bad rap, Dataverse Link. Initially, it had a lot of limitations. There was the whole region restriction for a while that you could only set up a link between a Dataverse environment that wasn't the exact same region as your Fabric capacity. And here I'm not, my reference here is Europe. If I have my Fabric capacity in Western Europe and my Dataverse environment in North Europe, I could not set up a link. They had to be in the same. That restriction is now lifted, and now it's only geography. So I can go from North Europe to West Europe, that's fine. But I cannot go from West Europe to Africa. The other sort of thing I just wanted to demystify here, a lot of people are super afraid that Dataverse link costs a lot of money, because while it's true that setting up Dataverse link actually under the hood creates a one-to-one copy of all of the data that you're syncing. It's not true that this consumes the super expensive Dataverse database storage. Database storage in Dataverse is crazy. It's 40 gigabytes, $40 per gigabyte, ludicrous. But this managed Dataverse managed lake and the Delta Parquet files, which are super compressed, by the way. So if you have 40 gigabytes of data that you're syncing to Fabric, you can imagine them being compressed tenfold. So maybe they'll only take up 4 gigabytes. They will not cost you $40 per gigabyte. They will only cost you file storage at about $2 per GB. So don't be too worried about the cost here. I think some people are unnecessarily afraid of that. I want to skip a little bit ahead here because I'm already spending more time than I planned on each of these demos. Some of you might have heard that you can also create shortcuts directly to Dataverse. And then you think, what's the point of those links you just talked about? Why bother syncing data from Dataverse to Fabric if I can just create a shortcut? Well, let me tell you why. So if I go into my Fabric Lakehouse and I say get data and I click new table shortcut, I can indeed select Dataverse as a shortcut destination. The weird thing is I can only create connections to Dataverse environments where I've created a Fabric link for Dataverse, a Dataverse link for Fabric. So this nice little shortcut button only works to environments where I set up solution number 2. So if you want to do solution number 3 here, you need to also do solution number 2. Why would you then bother doing this? Well, if you ask me, the true value here is that Dataverse link creates this super ugly duckling of a lakehouse that you cannot rename because otherwise you'll mess up the link. You just get it kind of, it's like a landing zone. This the auto-created lakehouse. What I like to do if I want to start exposing this data is that I very much prefer actually going into my data hub workspace, my data hub lakehouse or central lakehouse, and shortcut only the tables that I need. So if I'm syncing 400 tables, but only 50 of them are relevant, I can shortcut those 50 relevant tables in to a lakehouse that I determine the naming of, so that the users don't need to worry about why all these weird characters and stuff like that. So to me, it's like icing really on the cake. These shortcuts, it's a good way of distributing things away from the landing zone, but they don't. I just wanted to highlight here that this one does not replace methods 1 and 2. Rather, method 2 is a prerequisite for this one. All right. I think that was everything I had to say about that. Yeah, this was just from the Microsoft documentation, yeah, to prove that was true. How else can we get Dataverse data into Fabric? Now we're getting into territory where it's a little more, I want to say, regular methods here, and I just want to throw them out there. From a low-code perspective, Dataflow Gen 2 is a pretty great option. It's, just like if you were building a Power BI report using Power Query to connect to Dataverse, you can do that. You'll be connecting to the TDS endpoint of the tables in Dataverse. It'll treat it like a SQL database. You can do that with the Dataflow Gen 2 and land the data in a lakehouse or a warehouse or a Fabric SQL DB, low-code style, very easy to set up. It comes with the usual caveats of Dataflow Gen 2 that they too are because they are low code and need to accommodate for a lot of often ugly transformations. They are a little expensive in terms of CU, so usage on your Fabric capacity, right? But I don't know if you've been following along with the Dataflow Gen 2 releases in the past year, but at FabCon Europe last fall, they announced a heap of performance improvements. So Dataflow Gen 2 are really not as expensive anymore as they used to be, especially if you start employing some if what you're doing doesn't involve a lot of transformation work. If it's just copying stuff, it's actually going to use the data pipeline copy job engine to do some of that for you. So it's really quite a good solution like that. What I like about using Dataflow Gen 2 versus the links we talked about before is that we don't have that intermediate step of copying our Dataverse data or duplicating it into a managed lake or into Azure, into a storage account. With the links, you could say, data sort of ends up in three places. It's in Dataverse, it's in the lake, and then it's in your lake house at the end, even though that's just a shortcut to the lake. With the Dataflow Gen 2 solution, data will be in Dataverse, and then it's going to be copied over to whatever destination in Fabric you select. So I like that approach very much, and I do that actually myself just for lots of low-code projects. I wouldn't do this if I had huge amounts of data, but anything I do for demos and stuff where I need to get some data across, that's what I'll use. A really weird cowboy method is that you can also integrate Dataverse data through semantic models. I don't want to, this is just for fun. I don't want anybody to actually go ahead and do this. But I just wanted to show you that if you have a semantic model somewhere, let me just pick something else here. Don't I have a demo workspace? Here we go. Demo. Any semantic model will do. In your semantic model settings, there's this weird flag called OneLake integration. If you toggle this one on, it will automatically duplicate or sort of persist all the data that's in your semantic model into OneLake. So in OneLake, you can then also access data that's coming from a semantic model. It's kind of backwards. Usually semantic models are reading data from OneLake. Not a lot of people know you can do this, but you can also use semantic models to put data into OneLake. It's kind of useful if you're building semantic models with random Excel files and you want that data to become shareable. You can kind of do it backwards this way. Technically speaking, I could also create a Power BI report that connected to my Dataverse data with import mode or something using Power Query to connect. Upload it, publish it to the Power BI service, check this box, and that data will then feed into to my OneLake. And what's really weird is that this method seems to be a little cheaper, a little faster than Dataflow's Gen 2. I cannot tell you why. It's the same engine, but this one, in my testing benchmarking, has been a little cheaper. But I would not recommend my worst enemy to do this because governance-wise, it's an actual nightmare because you have no way to really monitor that backwards synchronization process. Lastly, I just wanted to address, obviously, you can also integrate data a little more, I don't necessarily want to call it pro-code style, but let's call it data engineering as sort of the profession that would use these tools, right? Pipelines, copy jobs, notebooks. The barrier of entry here is being lowered significantly if you have an agent by your side, right? I can write a Python script with an agent for a notebook that can integrate with Dataverse, so you probably can too. And pipelines and copy jobs are truly more or less low code. So I mean, the actual exercise of going into, let's just find the right workspace again here. Going into a workspace and creating a copy job, I'm not sure if we need to see the entire thing here, but the wizard that allows you to do this is point and click. So you do just need to create a connection to your Power Platform environment. You can select the tables that you want to copy across, and it's going to land it in the lakehouse for you. So it's I would call this a low code way of doing it as well. Yeah, so you can see there's just a connector here that's Dataverse. It's like setting Power Query up. So if you're familiar with Power BI, don't be afraid of using copy jobs. And copy jobs, if you first manage that, I mean, that's baked into data pipelines. So then you're off to the races with pipelines, and you can, string multiple copy jobs together and trigger error handling and stuff like that. If the copy job fails, get a notification. So I'll highly recommend you to check out those approaches too. But I think what I wanted to get across here, running through all these different methods, is that there's a heap of different ways that you can do this, right? And I think that by far the easiest ones to set up, because they're kind of set and forget, are the different link options. And whether or not you're going to use the shortcut or not, I think that'll be up to you. But if you need more control over the process, the thing that data flows and copy jobs and pipelines and notebooks have going for them is that you can schedule those to run however you please, right? With the links, you're at the mercy of that kind of managed experience. For Azure Synapse Link, you can only do every 15 minutes, or you can do, of course, less frequent than that, and Dataverse Link every hour. The others you can schedule, much more frequently if you want to. Before we go the other way, before we say how do we then go from Fabric to Dataverse, I just wanted to make sure that we're covering any questions that there might be. I haven't seen anything in the chat, but you're welcome to unmute yourself or write something or raise your hand in the room as well. Does anybody have any questions so far? It's also a massive amount of information to take in 20 minutes, so I don't blame you. But I'll continue then.
I actually have been writing down some questions that I wanted to ask you, but I plan to leave it to the end, just depending on time.
That's fine.
But if there aren't any other questions, then please continue. If there are other questions, just ask now or later, up to you.
Yeah, you are very welcome to ask them.
All I would say now is please keep coming with these pro tips that you're giving us. Plenty of pro tips. They just bring them.
I'll do my best. They are hard-earned learnings, you know. It's from banging my own head against the wall with these things. So you don't need to make the same mistake.
Yeah, well, that's precisely why we have these events. It is exactly for that, because no one wants to bump their heads unnecessarily.
No, that's exactly it.
Thank you.
So how do you go the other way, and why should you even? I honestly think, I don't know how much you've been following along with those announcements that's been coming since out of Microsoft Build this week. I'm a little afraid on behalf of the Power Platform when we're talking, say, Power Apps and stuff like that. My use cases for Power Apps, they are diminishing by the year with the features that the Fabric team are throwing out. I don't know what kind of internal competition they've got going on at Microsoft, but I used to say that Power Apps was like it's what was my preferred solution for creating small write-back applications for Fabric or small extensions for the stuff I was doing in Fabric in general. What has happened is that last year they announced translytical task flows, the native Fabric feature that allows you to do write-back sort of from within Power BI without Power Apps. And then Monday they announced this agent-driven framework, Rayfin, or Fabric apps, that allows you to build essentially full software applications within Fabric directly connected to your Fabric backend. So I will say there is increasing motivation to question whether that app you're building needs to live in one place or the other. With that said, there are of course use cases where you want to build Power Apps or Power Automate flows or whatever it might be, and you want data to be in Dataverse, either because you want to bundle it with the rest of your solution in the Power Platform, so you'll want that data that lives in Fabric, you'll want that data table to be inside of Dataverse together with all the other Dataverse tables that you're using. Or it could be that for integration purposes, it's just a little difficult to set up the connection to Fabric directly from Power Automate or Pages or whatever you might be using, and it's nice to have it there. So assuming that you want to go that way, how do you get data there? And I'm not going to go as deep in the demos here for the sake of time, but I'll kind of give you a flyover of the at least 4 different ways that you can do this. My preferred way is usually to do what's called a virtual table. And I will just show this one real quick. When you're in your Dataverse environment and you're in tables, you can create a new table, and instead of just defining the schema, you can create a virtual table. This one will ask you to create a connection to Microsoft Fabric if that's what you want to do. The connection is broken. Let's just fix that one so you can see it. And then you can select a table in Fabric and basically mirror it into your Dataverse environment, which is super cool. The only prerequisite here is that the data has to come from a lakehouse. You cannot use a warehouse for some weird reason. And you'll need for the table to have a primary key. And it's not enough that the primary key is a unique column. It needs to actually, in the code of the table, be set as a primary key. Otherwise, you won't be able to select it. I'm a little curious if this one actually has that. Can I select the table here? Otherwise, I can at least show you what it looks like. Let me just sync this one for the sake of it. Loading required fields. But it's very easy. It's a GUI experience here, right? It automatically identified that I have a primary key set, and I can set up this, and the data will then be live synced and when I say live here, we're not talking 15 minutes. That's way less of a delay. I'm not sure exactly what the tech doing this underneath is, but the fact is the data gets into Dataverse very nicely, and this works excellent for using Fabric data inside of, say, Power Apps. And you can bundle this together with your existing Power Platform solutions, use it in Power Automate, use it in any Power Platform product that you'd like. So I very much prefer virtual tables. There are times where these do not work. As I said, data needs to be in a lakehouse. Data needs to have a primary key. There could be scenarios where that is not the case. What do you then do? Well, yeah, and important to mention here, data is actually not replicated. You're just referencing the data that's in Fabric. That's an important distinction here. Dataverse have their own versions of data flows that you can set up. So they're not called Dataflow Gen 2. They're not Power BI data flows. They are Dataverse data flows, and they were sort of the weird bastard child of data flows Gen 1 before we got data flows Gen 2. I'm a little hesitant to recommend them because personally, I have experienced so many bugs with Dataverse data flows. I can count on one hand the amount of times it's just been working without any issues, but I can count on many hands the number of times I've had failing data flows. I don't know what it is. It's just not a super stable solution. But if you need to ingest some data from Fabric into Dataverse and you need a little bit of transformation, maybe you want to filter out half the data, maybe you want to aggregate it, group it by some metric, it's the simplest solution. What's not simple is if your Dataverse end product needs to have proper sort of application lifecycle management. If the table needs to go through dev, test, prod, it's really difficult to set up Dataverse data flows to respect going through those different stages. Also know that data is replicated and will consume database storage, the super expensive storage, $40 per gigabyte. Not sure what it is in South Africa, but the expensive one. And know that data, contrary to virtual tables, is not live and depends on a refresh schedule. I'm not going to show you how to build the entire data flow, just show you where it is. It's under the data flows tab, which once again, if it's invisible to you, sidebar, more, discover all, and somewhere in here, you'll find data flows. From in here, you'll create a new data flow and it's going to look very much like the data flow experience in Fabric. For some reason, it's just not super stable. You can see this last one even failed on me. You can see how long ago I abandoned that one back in 23. But this one's still going. Okay, that's kind of fun. Just showing you here that it's basically just Power Query. So don't be afraid of it. It's just, for some reason, I'm having stability issues with it. All right. So Fabric data pipelines, while they can be used to copy data from Dataverse to Fabric, can actually also be used to go the other way. Not many people know this, but you can sync data with a Fabric pipeline to other sources, and Dataverse is one such possible destination. This will require a little bit of Azure tinkering. You need an app registration. You need a service principal. You need to add that principle to your users list in the Power Platform environment, and then you need to create a copy activity in a pipeline to sync the data into Dataverse. This one is actually a little complex and technical to set up, so I'm not going to show you an entire live demo of this. If you have large amounts of data that you need to copy and persist in Dataverse, this is a better solution than the data flows. It's way more stable. So there are arguments for doing this. If you want to do it, I'll recommend you, and this is a pro tip, look up the work that Scott Sewell has been doing on this. He's a Microsoft PM. He's no longer on the Dataverse team or the Fabric team, but he used to be the one sort of basically managing all the releases that were done in this space. And he has some excellent YouTube videos and a great GitHub repo with lots of slides and tutorials and stuff you want to use. So look up Scott Sewell and he'll have videos on using data pipelines, but also those links that we talked about earlier. He's the guy who taught me most of the stuff that I know about these things. So just a shout out for Scott there. The last thing I want to show here, I'll tell you about is, of course, that maybe this is the most obvious way to use Fabric data in Dataverse. You can just use the built-in connectors, right? So if you're building a Power App, I think maybe the easiest way to create or use Fabric data is just to use the native connector. So if not sure why it's loading here. I want to just create a blank app to show you that this works. Create from blank. Sure, responsive. I should have preloaded some kind of environment here, but I promise it won't take long. Let's just find some data here meanwhile that we want to get over. Again, let's do demo. I had that Contoso data set, right? So if I here, Contoso warehouse, copy SQL connection string. If I grab this SQL connection string, so this was just a Fabric warehouse. If I wanted to use that data in Power Apps, I could go into my Power App on the left-hand side, find my data, say add data, and look for a SQL server connection. I don't need to create a new connection. I could use the existing one. Not sure why I did that. Go. As the server name, I need to provide it that SQL Server connection string. And as the database name, I need to give it the name of the warehouse. I can put Contoso warehouse. If I click connect now, I'll just be able to grab the tables I want. And I have a live connection to my Fabric data warehouse. And this is both read and write. So I can just consume data from dim customer, and I can write data back to dim customer if that's what I want. So I mean, if I put in a gallery here, vertical gallery, populated with my dim customer, it's gonna throw in data live from the DB. And I'm not sure why we're not seeing anything. Oh, it's just still loading. You see the little ants running across the screen. Hopefully it'll show in a second. But this works, and by far, if you want to build, a Power App that's just live connected to something in Fabric, this is the way. The only the solutions that I showed you before there, if you somehow need to, great. I was always like that with live demos, right? Got a network error. The other three solutions I spoke about a second ago, they're mostly if you want to persist the data in Dataverse for some reason. If you just need a live connection to some data in Fabric, the native connectors are actually pretty good. Just a brief note on these native connectors. You should be aware that while you can read data from lakehouses, they do not support write operations. So if your use case requires your app or your automate flow to write data to Fabric, you can only use warehouses or SQL DBs in Fabric. So you cannot write to lakehouses directly. That's important to know. Right. I think that's kind of what I wanted to say there. So just to recap, we went over super many different options here. There are more ways to go from Dataverse to Fabric than vice versa. And these are probably not the only ways. It's not an exhaustive list, I don't think. These are just, ways that I've experimented with. And while I can't say that I have a clear winner on each of these for every case, I think on the Fabric to Dataverse side, I tend to prefer virtual tables and data connectors over the other two. And on the Dataverse to Fabric side, I tend to favor Fabric Link if I'm okay with sort of the ambiguous nature of the sync job, or data flows Gen 2 personally. If I needed to push lots of data, I'll go with a copy job instead. Whew. So that was kind of it for the presentation. But I'm very open again. If there are any questions that we should address here, I'll be more than happy to discuss with you.
Sure, okay, first of all, can you hear me? Because I was on mute earlier, but yeah.
Works.
Okay, John, that was tremendous. So please, obviously, just stick around because I do have a few questions and maybe some others do as well. But I do want to just say thank you very, very much. It is very clear that you are extremely knowledgeable.
Thank you.
I loved all those pro tips. I'm delighted that we're recording this session because some people might not need this now. Okay.
Right.
But they will need it at some point. Like for instance, my colleagues and I, we hadn't done any of this until last week. One client needed it, so I was like, oh, well, that's convenient. So I wonder what, we'll figure out, and I wonder what John's going to show us next week, so now Yusha knows way more than I ever thought, so that's great.
Maybe too much.
Before I ask some of my questions, let me check with anyone else, either in the room or online. Are there any questions out there?
Yeah, I have two questions.
Please go for it. Go for it.
Thank you, John. It was a very informative session, and you covered a lot in a very short span of time. So my first question is, like, in one of the slide, like we saw that the data is being written into data warehouse without being used in the data lake. So my question is, like, how do we, the conventional way of getting the data is into the data lake, like kind of an ODS or operational data source, and then like you put into the data warehouse, like in fact or dimension tables, but how it works like other way around, like when you put the data in the data warehouse and without consuming it from the data lake.
So are you asking how you would go about modeling the data after it lands in that warehouse, or what's the question?
In one of the slides, we saw that the data is being loaded or it is returned into the warehouse directly. So, so the conventional way is what I'm trying to understand is like either you have a staging layer where you have multiple source system, you consolidate into an system,
I see.
and then you get into an enterprise thing where you
Yeah,
have.
yeah. Okay, I understand the question now, and it's a very debated topic you're getting into. Super good question. You're completely right that in enterprise scenarios, especially, you'll want to treat the initial sort of sync or wherever the data lands is being persisted in a lakehouse or warehouse. You'll want to treat that really like a landing zone. And my recommendation would be to treat that destination warehouse as like a new source in Fabric. Treat it like a staging area, and then take that data through whatever transformation stages you have. It might be that you don't need to do much cleanup at all. If the data is coming from Dataverse, it's probably pretty clean already. But I've had the most success implementing these solutions when treating the destination in Fabric like a new staging area or a new landing zone, instead of just assuming that this can go straight into my gold layer. Because frankly, you sometimes do want to enrich the data or use the Dataverse data to enrich something else throughout some kind of maturation, right? Going through bronze, silver, gold, or staging modeled, curated, or whatever your layers are called. So I would advise you to treat it like a staging table.
Yeah, the reason for asking this is like usually you have the CDC, this change data capture, or even sometimes like you have the, I mean, if you don't have historical records maintained.
That's true.
So the data warehouse predominantly like has the, when caters for the SCD type 2, where you have the active records and also you have the historical records, and
Okay, so to let me nuance that slightly, I will say I think the use case for the link solutions are much greater the less enterprise the organization is. Let me put it that way. It's a great low-code option. So if you're just a, maybe you're not even a data team. Maybe you're just a business team that happens to have access to Fabric as well, and you want to build Power BI reports, and you need some data from Dataverse in your Power BI reports. You want to sync it over. That Dataverse link is a great option because it just copies the data over and it's there for you to use. And you maybe don't even care about the whole, refinement of the data. You don't care about dev test prod. Then it's a great case. If you are an enterprise, you have actual engineers working on your data platform, I would probably prefer using a pipeline or a notebook to extract the data from Dataverse in the more precise way. So only extracting exactly what you need, set up the schedule and configure the resources required for this in a way that's optimized for your scenario. That will also make it a little easier to integrate it into your existing platform layers, I think.
Thank you, John. My last question is like in the Dataverse, we had seen that there's a virtual table. So like when you refer to virtual table, I wanted to understand a bit deeply whether it is like can we use a materialized view, or is it more of a gold copy dump where we use like a metadata or metadata tables actually?
You have to use real tables. You cannot use views or materialized views. It has to be a table coming from a lakehouse, and then it is just a sort of a window into that table itself, more or less live. I'm not quite sure what the delay is once a change is made in the table. How soon is it available in the virtual table? But it's minutes tops. So it's it doesn't need to be necessarily, it could be a fact table or it could be a dimension table. It just needs to have a primary key. Then you can create a virtual table. I would usually do it from the gold layer, indeed. Yes, from something that is heavily modeled and ready to be consumed by data products, by end users. So I would not connect some kind of raw data source as a hybrid table in Dataverse.
Thank you, John. Because like usually we have multiple layers of user privilege. So
Sure.
at some point of time, you don't want to expose the direct tables. So either you create the the subtables, or you create a view where we wanted to with the security layer and also performance oriented also. So we don't hit the tables and lower the performance. So in that
Great
category,
point. That would be a good use case for hybrid tables. In that case, you could avoid having to give direct credentials on the lakehouse itself, but expose only what data you wanted in a hybrid table in the Dataverse solution. That could be one way of doing it.
Thank you, John. Yeah.
Good questions. Really, really good.
Mine was more just a comment, and I think you guys started alluding to it. I think John has done fantastic work, and that's because he's sort of done use case selection to decide which pathways he is going from an architectural decision and tooling. And obviously, without exposing your entire IP and knowledge, it would be really cool to see how you've made your decision in tooling and so forth, and how that linked to your architectural design choice. Because each of these have different patterns, and I think it's phenomenal work you've done. The question was, how would you share that with us, if you could? If not, we'll come for your paid services somehow. But well done.
Yeah.
I could underlyingly start to see it before, like less mature audience, you will miss those decisions you've made along the way, which is what he was asking to.
Yeah, it's a really good comment. I think what this session probably needs is more sort of specific use case diagrams, right? Where you can see how each of these components actually fit into, say, some kind of analytics use case that span Power BI and Power Platform, and you want to understand that data that comes from Power Platform could be used in Power BI or vice versa. So when is it you would pull on each of these tools from the toolbox? I think that's actually excellent feedback. I'll think about how I can incorporate that into the session so it becomes a little more maybe business tangible as well and not so technical.
All right, excellent. Guys, so we're actually at our end cutoff time now. Obviously, we're going to keep the meeting running for anyone who can stay on. I do still have one or two questions that I would like to ask, but for those who are inclined to drop off, I still want to cover just a bit of feedback, nothing to do with the presentation, but some feedback from the surveys that were generated from the previous events. Then just run through our GitHub repository and so on. So I'll need 5 or 8 minutes for that at the very, very end, if that's okay. All right, but coming back to John, so I actually had 2 questions before today's session. One was about regions, so you covered that because actually in the experience that we had last week, we had exactly that. The Power BI region was in Northern Europe, and the Dataverse instance was in Western Europe. Okay, and I was thinking, is that a big problem? You've just mentioned now, look, it's the same geography, so that's okay. All right, so that's good. But then my second question was, I was literally wondering about, this Fabric link or the Dataverse link versus the Synapse link. And you started off with Synapse, and then you were talking about Fabric. So we've gone with the Fabric link, the Dataverse Fabric link. Yeah. But you kind of worried me a bit when you said, like, okay, so I also heard the story about how long it takes to do the initial ingestion. Okay, I didn't hear 4 days. I heard like 24 hours, but then the thing I was puzzled by is you said, if the first one takes like an hour or 3 hours, the next ones, even incrementally, can only ever be that I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, on every hour. Yeah, I don't know. But you have no way of sort of managing that. It's just going to pick a time for you. And I think, but that's not confirmed, that it's picking the time that you created the link. And then every hour on that minute, it's going to kick off a refresh and try to sync your data.
Okay. All right. So it's not like if my first one took 3 hours, then it's only ever going to be every 3 hours. The point is it's
No,
going to
no,
be
no.
every hour,
Every hour.
but at 16:20, 17:20, 18:20, something like that. Okay. All right.
Exactly.
All right.
And then,
All
of
right,
course, if you have thousands, millions of rows that changed, that refresh could ironically take longer than an hour, and a new refresh could start kicking off while the old one is still going. I haven't had that case myself,
Yes.
but
Okay.
in theory, it could clash.
Yeah. Okay. So I doubt we would have that problem with this client
No.
as well. Not large
Rarely.
data. Okay. All right. Cool. And what have I written here? Docs. Okay, no, I can't quite read my handwriting now, so that's a pity.
You're always welcome to
Talking
send
fast.
send that question afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was writing as fast as I could, but really what it comes down to, so maybe if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to do the post. Oh, sorry,
Can I
Tara.
ask
Yeah.
one question?
Yeah,
Hi,
sure.
John. If you're sharing from Fabric to Dataverse, can you share your semantic model, or do you just share individual tables? I'm a bit confused about that.
You'll be sharing the individual tables, the data that the semantic model is based on. So you cannot sync your semantic model as such. No, that's not an option. So usually you'll build your semantic model on top of Fabric Lakehouse, Warehouse, or SQL DB. And if you want to use that data from your semantic model in Dataverse, you'll need to identify from which warehouse or lakehouse or SQL DB is that data coming from, and then set up your preferred method of synchronization to Dataverse from there.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that. So if you don't mind, John, I'm going to take the screen share back from you.
Please do. Please do.
Okay. All right, so guys, I'm sharing there now. At least, yeah, I think I'm delighted that the sharing is working. Okay, so guys, just this is a slide that I wanted to show at the start, but now it's at the end. So obviously, Teams etiquette. We've had the meeting already, so ignore that. But on the green QR code is the feedback survey, and so please do fill that in. Every single time that you come, say you love the speaker. I have to chuckle when you use the F-bomb. You were then muted for a bit, and I wondered if somehow the the Teams chatbot was like there was a violation and it muted you.
Then you didn't hear my apology.
I heard that, and absolutely, I'm just teasing to say, like, put it in the survey. I'm just joking, but I'm sure everyone's going to give you 5 out of 5 for a great presentation. But guys, do the survey, and then on the yellow side is the GitHub repo. Now, it's extra important that I mention this now, okay? Because you do know that we always record these sessions, and the YouTube video will be published sometime next week. We often get people coming to these meetings for the first time, so they might not hear us and know that we've got a YouTube channel. And also, they might not have known that 2 months ago we did topic A or topic B or topic C, or 6 months ago or 12 months ago. So in the surveys that we got after our last session, we actually got 8 surveys, which was the highest we've ever got. So first of all, thank you for that. So Jess, Kaylin, and I met, and we went through all of them. Now, we don't have enough time to go through them now, but I just wanted to mention a few things about that. But the main point is that a lot of you guys obviously new, and you're coming to these meetings and you're asking for topic A or B, but we've actually recently had that topic. So what I wanted to do now, the yellow QR code is going to take you to our GitHub repo, which is where I'm going to now. Okay, so the GitHub repo, actually, let me just, yeah, those of you in the room, hopefully you can see it properly. I'm using these little pipes. Can you see here? Power BI News, pipe. Fabric News, pipe. Fabric and Power BI Back to Basics, Part 1. So what you can see from that is exactly the 3 topics that we did in that session. So it's a bit like a table of contents, okay? So if it is that you were interested in the PBIR formats or Copilot or Clicks, AI version, or SAP Analytics Cloud, or the Tableau AI version, you can go back and see what there was, and then go to our YouTube channel and find that particular video, okay? Or in here, there are the PowerPoint slides for the presentation for each of the speakers. Okay, so it really is very useful. We've only got 13 followers. I recommend you follow so that you know that when some new stuff is updated. And if you want to know what the YouTube channel, there it is there. Sorry, not there. There. So in about a week's time, today's video will be uploaded there. Okay. So use this as a table of contents, okay, so that you can see, because in the survey they said, oh, please can you talk about basic modeling? Well, we've done that quite a few times and there's plenty of videos. Please can we do some more advanced modeling? Well, we've done that as well. You know, please can you talk about AI and other products? Well, we've done that as well. Okay, so we obviously keep coming up with new topics and we'll repeat as the years go on, but some stuff has been covered before. Okay. All right. One other thing about the surveys, someone asked, can we start later? So we start at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. In fact, before COVID, we used to start at 6 p.m. Okay. Now we've chosen to start at 5 on purpose because I find if you start at 6 and if a meeting like today runs over by 10 or 15 or 30 minutes, that's now late into your family time, like 7:30. Okay. And so it gets late. So we've chosen 5 o'clock because that's in a way still office hours. It doesn't interfere too much. So if it is, we're going to keep it at 5 o'clock. We're not going to move it to 6. There are pros and cons, I understand. But then other people have said, yeah, the reason for delaying it is that sometimes you get stuck in traffic. Well, it nearly happened to me. And I was like due to present this thing. So it was stressful. If you're not presenting, then my suggestion is if you're late from work or there's heavy traffic, don't come in person, because also if you arrive late, it does put the speaker off and it's difficult, whatever. Don't come in person. Just join online. We are always online. Every single meeting is online. You know how we alternate for in-person every second one. But if you're running late, just join online. Okay, so don't let traffic get in your way about, therefore wanting to start at 6 instead of at 5. Okay. All right, so cool. I wanted to just cover those housekeeping things there. GitHub, YouTube, the surveys, and I think that's probably about enough admin. So there we are. We're 10 past 6. I would like to say thank you again to John from Denmark. John Vu, but did I pronounce it correctly?
That was pretty close. I'm not gonna lie. That's one of the better I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I wrote it down phonetically, but I'm not. Okay,
I'll take it.
But anyway, I'll still keep practicing. But John, thank you again. It
was a true pleasure.
Thank you for coming virtually to South Africa, and a big round of applause for John. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So those who are in person, please join us for some pizzas. Those who are online, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you in about, I guess 3 weeks' time for the end of June's event. Okay, Thursday the 25th, I think it is.
That will be online.
That is online only, yeah. And we've got a great presentation lined up for then as well. We'll also be doing Fabric and Power BI news then as well. Okay, all right. Cool, guys. Thank you very much.
See you.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, great. Yeah. Oh, bother, there was one thing anyway, it's too late. We're trying to do more collaboration with the other user group, the one that meets at Microsoft second Tuesday of each month. Next week. So we're telling about their events and they're telling about our events, and we're going to coordinate a data and AI event later on in the year. But I wanted to say, guys, here's the meetup. But anyway, I just realized now. Chat. Yeah, actually, that is a good point. Let's do that quickly. Okay. But anyway, why don't you guys go and grab some pizzas in the meantime? I'm going to just post that link on the chat. But yeah, thank you for joining in person as well. Okay. Yeah, with pleasure. Give me 2 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm Patrice.
I'm Tyro.
Oh, Tyro.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Yeah. This is my first one. Yeah, I found it on Meetup.
Oh.
Yeah.
I just want to explain something.
Okay, so did I overhear you correctly? This is your first one.
Yeah, it's my first one, yeah.
And your name?
Patrice. Patrice.
Patrice.
Yeah, Patrice. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And look, today's one was quite technical.
Yeah.
So I don't know where your skills are and where your area lies.
I'm AWS because I see
Okay.
this one is Azure.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just trying
Yeah.
to map it out, like
Okay.
how does it map to AWS? Like in AWS, you have SQL,
Yes,
how
yes.
you have AWS glue crawlers to create the tables. Then you can use Athena to do light analysis. Yeah.
This is completely. We're still in a meeting. Sorry.